And I am really excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Mead Mier Welburn, who is Sustainability Coordinator for Pima Association of Governments. And she is going to share with us today information on green infrastructure and low impact development policy and program updates for the low impact development working group of the Pima County and Tucson metro area. And I've been fortunate enough to sit in on a few of these as my schedule has allowed. And it's amazing at all the different areas that they are working on. I think that our communities in our counties can certainly learn from each other. So I'm excited for her to share some of their successes and what direction they think they're going. I know that they as well feel like they have a lot to glean from our group here. So if we can find ways to continuously cross-pollinate those ideas, I think each region will be so much better and farther ahead. So a couple of quick notes about Mead, and I can't believe this, but she says she has been with PAG for over 15 years and manages the regional watershed planning program. You must have started when you were like 5, I think. So, and since 2015, she has co-led the Low Impact Development Working Group with additional coordinators, including Marie Light of Pima County, which she is also here on the call, Irene Ogata with Tucson Water, and then Neha Gupta, who's with the University of Arizona. And the members of this particular group include local governments, nonprofits, consultants, and academics who meet monthly to share information and collaborate on projects. So very exciting. Mead's background, her education is in ecology, and she has a professional background in water resources. So a lot of experience in the nonprofit sector and with neighborhoods. Mead, do you want to go ahead and add to that intro? Because I'm sure you have lots more to share.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. So,
well, thank you so much. I feel honored to be part of your kickoff. And just thank you for inviting me and the LID working group to be here. I'm going to speak today, as Anne said, about the progress in the Pima County region. And I'll do my best to represent a variety of partners' work. So I wanted to mention, I guess, a little bit more background that I am part of an integrated planning department. And I wanted to mention this because green infrastructure is one of those topics that naturally fits really well into integrated planning efforts. And at PAG, we get involved where we can help one municipality learn from another's progress within watershed management. That is why PAG is involved, is because we work on regional coordination. And that's why I'm involved in the LID working group in particular. For those of you who might be less familiar with metro planning organizations, my board of directors is the Regional Council of Governments, and it's composed of the heads of all the local governments in our county. And like I said, our objective is cross-jurisdictional coordination. And in addition, maybe less familiar with this, is that we are the designated area-wide water quality planning agency for our county region by the state and EPA. I'm going to touch on a little bit of the history of the working group, just so that we're on the same page in case some of you are less familiar. And Anne asked me to speak about updates within the last year. I tacked on the last few years, including policy developments, GSI activities, design standardization, and who's involved. So I'll just give you a roundup, and I hope that these tidbits interest you in more detailed presentations from our partners. To say it briefly, the LID working group has its vision and goals. The roots come from the city-county water study that occurred locally. Evan Canfield from our Pima County Regional Flood Control District ran the working group for many years. Ann Moynihan was part of that as well and helped to lead the workshops. And then around 2015, They had met many of their goals, so we sort of branched out into a broader regional collaborative. And notably, this is when Marie, Neha, and Irene and I kind of took form of a team of leads, and we invited others to help be a rotating chair every month to get a lot of more engagement in the group. And Pima County DEQ, that's Marie Light, helps to actually host the physical meetings or the virtual meetings. So in this way, with the virtual meetings, we actually were able to stay pretty active through the pandemic and found it allowed new attendees and greater participation in certain ways. And maybe I've lucked out because we had a great computer crash at PAG, and it allowed me to free up a little time for a while to get the group going during the pandemic. So who's in the group? We welcome just about everybody: local governments, nonprofits, consultants, academics. We have participation from all those sectors, citizens, just interested teachers. We really aim to keep it multidisciplinary, and it looks like your group is as well. We're trying to connect the dots between flood control, water resources, water quality, transportation, heat islands, environment, community. We don't always have great participation by every discipline, but that's what we aim for through who we invite. So for example, some of these organizations that I haven't mentioned yet also include Pima County Housing Center, Watershed Management Group, Community Food Bank, Tucson Audubon, WLB Consulting, Wheat Design Group, and more. And in recent years, I did want to mention that we found another way to connect with other collaboratives. The Santa Cruz Watershed Collaborative locally is very active, and we've merged meetings with their One Water working group. Last year was a merged effort with the Cross Watershed Network that you may have participated in, and local Conserved Enhanced group has utilized the group as an advisory group. We have a growing emphasis on being multidisciplinary, and we're still aiming to grow more regionally as well to make sure all the towns are included. So here, hopefully you're familiar with some of our past resources prior to 2015. So in addition to these monthly meetings and workshops, these are the projects that were accomplished. A guidance manual, case studies to serve as examples. We passed resolutions through the regional council. We did the first auto case cost benefit study that has taken off across the state and Southwest, but our goal was to make sure it was calibrated for an arid environment. And then another really impactful past effort was the flood mitigation modeling to really show the effectiveness of PILID for flood control. And I think that was pretty groundbreaking. So here's some additional accomplishments. They're not necessarily directly from the LID working group, but still accomplished by the broader network of our colleagues locally. There's a lot of natural collaboration that occurs. And I think they serve as great models. There's the Tucson's commercial harvesting ordinance that is currently being reevaluated to make sure it's as effective as can be. The Green Streets Active Practice Guidelines, which is another policy. Detention retention requirements, which encourage LID, and has been integrated into drought response plans, which recently were updated as well. And now more of the municipalities include LID in their response planning. Most recently, there was a complete streets design guide that was developed, and many of us helped to integrate green infrastructure into that, which is really important that those two efforts weren't done separately. And you've probably heard of the different rebates Tucson Water has. They have done had done an evaluation in the last few years to make sure those were equitably distributed, and they work with SERI for low-income programs and work in funding Spanish language training. So they've really expanded their program over time. Here is a focus on just our work at PAG, which we did accomplish with our partners, but these are some of the PAG-led efforts. Hopefully you've heard of our prioritization mapping tool, the GI tool. We now house it in a resiliency planning map series, and it has updated functions and layers. So I invite you to continue to use it and look at it. And you may notice I wanted this presentation to be a resource afterwards. So those links are live, so you can click on them to find some of these policies and resources. Also in the past, we worked with the MS4s in our region to update the outreach materials for stormwater pollution prevention to include green infrastructure. If for those of you in the Phoenix area, you also have the AZ Storm Group. So I was curious if you've had some good collaboration there in your GI working group. And we created a policy inventory, but more recently, I believe American Rivers presented this possibly to you a couple years ago. We created the Sonoran Desert Green Infrastructure Resource Library, which is a playbook for transportation projects. That was a goal that many people across the group network had identified transportation as an area where more work needed to be done, more connections need to be made, and more guidance. So we focused on it through that transportation playbook. We also have new heat data improved. So that's not just one stamp in time anymore that we utilize for creating recommendations of where to install green infrastructure. Instead, it's a sum of the average summer temperature across 3 years. It's an improved data set. We worked with the U of A on it. And we have several years of tree data now, geographic tree canopy data. So now comparisons can be made to track it over time. And many of our analyses of how we're tracking progress in the region are written up in our regional green stormwater infrastructure plan. And the next slide has just a little page from that plan. It was our first opportunity to really publish the results of our mapping tool analysis. So it helps to state like, what is the current state of numbers of trees in our region? How many trees would it take to reach the different goals that municipalities have from 15 to 25% tree canopy? You can use it to compare where there's opportunities such as pervious cover, and use it to assess other priorities such as which ward has more heat or less tree canopy. So we were excited just to get those numbers down in a document that people could utilize, because many people knew that, for example, in Tucson, we have average of 7% tree canopy cover, but there wasn't a reference to be able to cite that until now. Here are our future goals for growth. This is identified through various efforts, but has been spoken about in our working group. It seems we're gaining partners in the health sector. There's a new grant for our health department to work with our green infrastructure tool. Climate work is really taking off. We're trying to integrate green infrastructure more in our shallow groundwater dependent ecosystems. A lot of the same techniques can be applied there to support our perennial creeks, and have more of a habitat approach to green infrastructure, because there are still some designs that are just, a basin with gravel and a tree. So we're trying to expand upon that vision. We see more and more efforts in green space access or different environmental justice efforts. This includes workforce development, and the city of Tucson is really working on that and engaging the community as well, which is an important part of social justice issues. There are some efforts working on regional standards and specifications for green infrastructure. And we're working on this primarily watching the different jurisdictions work on it individually. And then once more and more jurisdictions adopt this, we'll have more consensus and be able to adopt it at the regional level eventually. So it's a long process, but it is underway with the city of Tucson and the county. And I keep hearing mention of the value of certification requirements, especially for maintenance contractors that are hired. And the city of Tucson could again speak about what they're considering in that department. It always makes the news here when certain sites that are beloved in a neighborhood don't get maintained the right way by different contractors. So people are eager to hear about that development. Our most recent meeting topics have been some of those future goals that you saw. So we're just starting those conversations. We've had a series of presentations about LID and green infrastructure in rural areas. We figured that shouldn't be such a dichotomy, these conversations. And some of the studies that show the effectiveness at recharging shallow groundwater areas with green infrastructure. And the more that's studied, the more we'll be able to implement those over time and get support to fund them. We've been talking a lot about new funding opportunities, such as the increased federal funding that's supposed to be coming out. And Audrey presented a new tree guide that is available. Were recent reclamation studies. And this is what I was mentioning that Marie Light could speak more to. We were able to put together it was an adaptation strategy for decreased water supply in the future through using green infrastructure. And she had some of those maintenance costs in that I heard someone mention earlier they were interested in. So coming up, if you'd like to join our meetings, like Anne said, it'd be really great to cross efforts more between our two groups. We meet second Mondays at 3. Coming up next Monday, we have U of A speaking about research updates. Neha may have joined by now. She's presenting that. And Blue Baldwin from City of Tucson, along with Brooke, will be talking about their new maintenance program. So we're always welcoming new attendees. So come if you are interested. Speaking to another green infrastructure working group, this might seem very basic to say how we meet and why we meet, but I wanted to explain it because it seems critical to progress of green infrastructure to be able to connect beyond our directives of our own jobs, and it always ends up enhancing our work. So what our format is we meet monthly. We invite presentations who are interested in feedback or need more partners for collaboration, and sometimes find out there's opportunities for collaboration they weren't even expecting. We spend a lot of time just sharing general updates between all the partners, sort of like you did at the beginning. And this really helps to reduce any redundant efforts in case somebody's working on a similar project as you, helps you to stay current, especially back when we were low on funds at my work for a while and we weren't able to attend conferences. So this is a nice free way for people to stay relevant and learn from each other. And then our vision, our goals, this was a big discussion between us. How do you have goals when you don't have a directive to meet? So we base our goals on what individual members do have funding to pursue, where they want collaboration, but we also try to have a broader vision beyond that of what do we want the region to look like and how can we enhance what we do. There we go. I wanted just to point out that we have several members here today from our working group. So when we go through Q&A, I welcome others to chime in too, who can help to answer questions.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if Marie or Irene and Neha have anything they would like to add to the presentation, and also what activities might be going on in Tucson as well. That would be fantastic.
I'll mention that real quickly, but I know the others can say more because this is everyone else's work. I was really happy that Irene was able to reinitiate the urban heat island workshops locally. I mentioned that the city and county have started on those standards and specification updates, but two big areas over last year that are really exciting for us is the start of the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Fund. That would be Blue Baldwin leading that. There's a fee on the Tucson water bill that helps to fund it. She has a whole great staff now across departments. She's working across departments, and they're building a new maintenance and implementation program. And then Nicole Gillette is the city of Tucson's new urban forestry program manager. It's really great to have that new position. The Mayor Romero set a 1 million tree goal, so a much larger and more ambitious goal, and is working with an equity map for distribution and starting with projects like a site inventory. And of course, they could speak in a lot more detail about each of those.
Mead, this is Marie Light. I want to thank you for this resiliency tool that you've put together. I use it on a regular basis, and I know that some elected officials have been looking at this information because their sense is, how is my jurisdiction comparing to other people's? And from this map, it's pretty clear where the heat issues are, and it's not exactly, but there's a strong overlap between the high heat and the low tree canopy. And so it's really nice that Mead has put together this information from lots of different professionals, and it really does create a mesh for people to make really informed decisions. And certainly, Mead, you've been really terrific at picking up a topic or a theme and bringing in people, and the ability for people to have a clear idea about, oh, this is the latest thing that's going on, really does help to germinate new thoughts or more ideas, and to then focus on, well, where are those places where we have difficulties? And certainly, as Mead was mentioning, the maintenance is the bugaboo at this point, and I think everyone's working on that to get more information out to the public.
Thanks,
I think to add on to what Marie said, and I think maintenance is a perfect bridge, but we are, collectively tackling the maintenance problem, having Brooke Bushman added to the City of Tucson staff as the GSI maintenance coordinator. She's a really great asset, especially with her background in monitoring. Last year, we did a collaborative project sponsored by the U of A in partnership with the City of Tucson, with a number of NGOs and landscapers and partners to develop a maintenance manual, and also provide trainings for landscapers who would be eligible to apply to the city's RFP. So we're expanding our collective efforts to these difficult to tackle kinds of problems that seem to really sit at the crux of a lot of things. I think the other piece is that we also are getting a lot more interest in, new potential partners and different dimensions as, stormwater, the framing has really shifted to stormwater as a resource. So now Audubon is, interested in, expanding habitat in urban environments. And we have, community efforts like Flowers and Bullets in Tucson, thinking about GSI in terms of food systems. And the working group is such a great way to just say, you need to get up to speed, attend these meetings, and don't miss the round of introductions, because that is so valuable. So and I also really want to thank Mead, Marie, and Irene for just all of their consistent work in engaging people so that it hasn't fallen through the cracks as we've transitioned around coordinators.
Great. Well, I'd like to open it up. Thank you, Neha, so much for that information. I think the maintenance part of the equation, as you said, is really, it's kind of at the crux of expanding green infrastructure. And it seems like all entities, no matter where they are in the spectrum of green infrastructure, struggle with that part. And actually at the very beginning of the meeting, when we were doing introductions, Robert with the city of Buckeye was talking about how they were looking for maintenance information as well. So I think it's a very, very timely topic. I did want to give everyone the opportunity to ask questions, and certainly if Irene Ogata would like to add anything with regards to the city of Tucson, that would be great. I know she's been adding a few comments in the chat too, so just want to make sure. Irene, you have the opportunity to chime in as well.
Yeah, so I just put in there that, Blue and Brooke are working on that, a maintenance guidebook. And I know Neha probably knows a little bit about it, because when they did the workshop, I think a lot of the maintenance guidebook will be based on what they did in the workshop. Right, putting a document together always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So I say, hopefully before the end of the year, but it might not be the end of next year.
Yeah, it does take a lot, especially when you're asking for input and revisions and whatnot.
Yes.
There's a question in there about the details and specifications. And I know that Blue was working on that with our regional flood control district. Irene, do you have a sense about where they are with that process? I know they were coming to an end with that, but I wasn't sure where we are.
Yep, I'm not quite sure yet either. I know Kieran was working on that. And I think I've asked him to speak to the LAC, the Landscape Advisory Committee, a couple of times, and we've sort of been keep pushing it back. So I'm not sure where it's at. I want to say it's close, but again, as Anne is saying, with all the input, it always takes longer than we think it's going to be. Go ahead, Neha.
I think we're caught up in some late stage circulations. Everyone, that piece right before things launch is the part when you need to dot your I's and cross your T's.
Great.
So that's the draft the city and county are working on together, and then it would go through adoption phases after that. But this is a very significant development, as everyone's saying, to be able to get people to agree to what the updates need to be.
It looks like Dwayne has asked a couple of questions in the chat. Are there traditionally excluded groups in the area of green infrastructure? If yes, who are those groups? What measures have been taken to include them? And how receptive are those groups, I would imagine, to participating? And I think it would be different probably between Tucson and Phoenix as well as to those, but there might be similarities. So.
Do you want to take the first stab, or do you want me to jump in on this? Or I'll just run with it for a moment. Go on, Mead. Go ahead.
I just have a certain angle of experience, so it'd be good to hear yours as well. I through our green infrastructure tool, the map that Marie and I were mentioning, you can see which areas have less canopy. There is an association like the Phoenix area with those areas being more hot or more impoverished. Sometimes it's the older areas of town. In Tucson in particular, we have a really good water conservation ethic, and we're trying to also have a good tree ethic that it might be a good use of water, but in particular, trying to aim towards stormwater being the first resource that we depend on. So when we have used our map for community workshops, I'll just speak on my part. There was a learning curve. There was we had to figure out first who had already spoken with these communities and created plans in the past, because sometimes communities get over tapped. And we want to build on that rather than just run your process. So the receptivity was based on that. Like first they wanted everyone to do their homework and build on plans, and then they want to see action too, because oftentimes they've been studied and planned a million times before action occurs. So that's, I guess, my experience of the receptivity. And sometimes there's just a hard to handle issue. One thing we haven't talked a lot about is how do you handle gentrification or increased property values? And it's something that I feel like deserves a lot more attention. My limited experience, because I'm mostly on the planning end and not always on the implementation end.
Neha, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think, and this complements what Mead says very well, and especially I think she really undersold the degree to which the tools, the environmental justice tools that have been developed are very helpful from a planning and understanding. And to bring up the GSI maintenance manual effort again from last year, a big part of that was also offering training sessions in Spanish, making very intentional efforts to engage with and connect with landscapers who represent the diversity of the Tucson community and who also have, kind of niche areas in some of our more over impacted regions, if you will. The focus also on, expanding the benefits of GSI, water being kind of the primary one that started the discussion so far, but now as it's starting to expand into food systems and into these other lenses, we also see more and more people, coming on board. And, one of the people that I mentioned before, Flowers and Bullets, is it's an organization that does really work. It's an urban farm on the south side of Tucson to do a lot of engagement in their local community. So, by them taking up GSI and becoming advocates and incorporating it into their urban farm, they're also really expanding knowledge and awareness and excitement about GSI and into other communities, into other spaces. So there's an intentional component, kind of, I think Mead outlined that very well. But then there's also this organic and, kind of engagement, boots on the ground kind of component as well.
Marie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes. When Tucson Water first started their rebate program for people to install green infrastructure, what they found was that it was the people in the foothills, the wealthier neighborhoods that were taking full advantage of this. And they're like, wow, we're glad they're doing it, but there are some other communities that really need this. And so they did some research to figure out how to appeal to the lower income neighborhoods. And then they put together a rebate program specifically for them, and then integrated SERI, who were trainers who spoke Spanish and were part of the Spanish culture and could speak to them mean, there's different plant palettes that were attractive to them. So it was a question about how do we bring together all of the requirements. And so, and one of the really nice features of this was that they could install green infrastructure on rented properties as long as there was a approval by their landlord. So they were they were thinking about all the hangups that might prevent them from actually going out and building more green infrastructure. And I have not heard the latest about how this is working out, but I do know that most of these projects take about 3 years, and it's been about that long since they started. So maybe it's time to get an update from them on that.
That sounds like an interesting opportunity with rental properties in particular.
Yeah, especially if you're going to be installing the drought tolerant and heat tolerant vegetation, that those kinds of plants really flourish when there's water, and they do okay. They hang in there until the next season when there's rainfall. So there can be some time in between getting what you were looking for.
Sure. I think we have time for one last question. If anybody has one that they'd like to put out to Mead and the Pima County and Tucson group.
And there's a question in the chat
Oh, is there? Okay.
from Cecilia. I think that might be a good one to bring forward, just to talk about the relationships between PAG and MAG. And
Oh,
with
okay.
the
I'm
new
sorry if I
environmental
missed
leader, Tim, it might be a good timing to bring that forward to MAG with the new environmental leadership that's in there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I missed that one. Cece, you want to?
I think I sent it incorrectly straight to Tim.
Okay.
But for many of you who don't know, up at MAG, there is a new appointment of Tim Franquist, who's now going to be entirely focused on environmental initiatives and policy, et cetera. We're very excited about that. He's in from State Parks. And I was just curious, I was going to ask the group if this is an opportunity to increase the PAG to MAG guidance, et cetera. So.
Sounds like a great opportunity. I know PAG and MAG have functioned a little differently over time. We have different types of departments, different funding mechanisms, but we definitely learn a lot from each other. The process they're going through to adopt green infrastructure standards has helped inform what we need to look forward to. My equivalent there works primarily on wastewater. So she definitely has an interest in water quality, but I think most of my conversations have been more with their transportation department, like complete streets types of efforts. So that might be another good connection. But I haven't met the new environmental contact that you mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it might be a good time for an introduction, Cece, with Tim and Mead and the group as well. I think Tim probably needs to get out in the community too. And we'd certainly love to have him join the work group discussions and his staff. So it sounds like a great question and a great opportunity. Well, good. Well, Mead, I want to thank you and your wonderful LID working group for joining us today. It's been very informative. And so I just want to say thank you for your presentation and for all your information and great work that you're doing in Pima County and for the communities that you serve, and also with the city of Tucson and of course U of A. What a great group you have going down there. And we have so much we can learn from you on a consistent basis. So I look forward to you guys participating with us, and I will definitely let our folks know when your LID work group meetings are taking place too, so they can join.
Thanks so much for the invitation and for connecting us and for coming to our meetings as well. I also just really want to thank Neha, Marie, and Irene for joining in to help represent the projects. I hope that wasn't so many projects that it was hard to absorb, but I didn't want to leave anyone out.
It takes a village, right?
Yeah.